What's up, gente? What's up, Raza? So I'm coming to you live. I want to report really quick some great news, and that's that the U.S. Supreme Court this morning, not too long ago, rejected Trump's claim that from birthright citizenship that anybody who was born here to parents illegally in the United States that they were not citizens. This is big. This is huge. This is great news, if anything, because that's what Trump was hoping for something where he could himself declare, along with the white supremacists, they could declare, for example, that if you were born here to parents who were illegally here, you are not a citizen. That would have meant that on an average, 300,000 children born in a certain year, or even 250,000, you're talking about millions of people over the years whose children um, would not have been allowed to be citizens, or whose parents could easily be swept up, deported, and they themselves would be left here by themselves. This is a good thing because white supremacy built this country. We know that. And even here, the judges, the justices know that Trump was wrong because their parents, their ancestors came here, and the language says subject to the jurisdiction thereof in the 14th Amendment. For those of you who know about the Constitution, the 14th Amendment is what, after the Civil War, following the Civil War, said that all free people born here were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And that's another thing. The Supreme Court, those three judges, including the black judge Thomas, the first black judge ever in the Supreme Court, who was totally sell out, totally sold out as people a long time ago. He said that this is sad because this was only meant for black people. That is not the case necessarily, but that was unfortunately the historical context of it, because America was basically built on white supremacy. We hope America has gotten better, but over the years, if anything, has gone backwards, right? This, though, today's ruling in the Supreme Court allows it for families of migrant children, kids who were born here, whose parents came here, whether illegally, overstayed their visa, whether they stayed at a job or something. It allows for these children not to have to be worried about a family separation, much less deportation. And that's the same for the families who would have been broken up, because sometimes you got mixed families here, right? So this is a big win for people, and a big loss for Trump, a huge loss for Trump. It goes on to say in the AP, a divided Supreme Court on Tuesday upheld a broad conception of birthright citizenship, rejecting rejecting Donald Trump's executive order declaring that children born to people who are in the United States, quote unquote, illegally or temporarily, are not American citizens. This is important again, people. Anybody born in that status, under that circumstance, would not be considered American citizen, could be subject to deportation. Well, we already know what Trump, the administration, is doing, so they would have just ramped it up 100%, or 200 or 300%, whatever. They would have just gone wild, buck wild. So this is good. And I tell you this, everybody, because I was hoping for this kind of news. I was hoping that these, by the way, still got no love for the Supreme Court, especially the right wingers on there. There's usually six right wingers that vote together, and three. In this case, you still had three that voted to not allow citizens or children of citizens to have this. So they were called the dissent, but they lost. The other six were joined by, in this case, the majority was joined the three women who usually they're liberal, appointed by Obama, and Biden. They're liberals appointed by the Democrats. But in this case, even the Supreme Court right wingers like Justice Roberts and all them, who and others who were appointed by Trump himself, they disagree with Trump. So this is good news, everybody. This is great news. Having said that, though, I want everybody listen clearly. This does not mean the battle is over. This does not mean they can't come back and do something. As a matter of fact, I expect them to come back with a different approach, and that's for Congress to write a law to go after people born here, because that's the other option. And the truth is, Congress is the only one who's supposed to be allowed to deal with citizenship or with immigration. Only Congress. It says so in the Constitution. But since the current Congress controlled by the Republicans, since they bowed down and gave Trump all their power, since they've allowed Trump to do whatever they want, since they have no spine and others are just straight up right white supremacists, they give him their power. So in this case, they should have been in the forefront a long time ago. So that's what scares me is that they can come back and say, "Hey, we're going to write a law to get these people out of here, these black and brown people out of here, these illegal, quote unquote, illegal aliens out of here." I hate that word, but I haven't gone through this today, this morning. This is a good thing. I don't expect this anytime soon, but this is where we can't get complacent. We can't get too happy. I say we can't get too comfortable because this is where they come back at us. When we least expect it is when they come back at us. So, judging from the news, people are happy. People are celebrating all over the states and different countries and different there were small neighborhoods where people were fearing. We still have ICE to deal with. That's a bunch of BS we're going to have to deal with as long as he's there. And we still have these other things, including these racist laws here in this country that we're going to have to deal with. But in terms of this is a big win for Raza. Now, there were some big losses too, including the trans case. And I say big losses for a lot of the people who are trans. Big losses also involving money and finances. This is huge. And it's a shame because this morning the Supreme Court said that well, if you have enough money, now you don't have to limit it. In the past, I should say, people who had to limit corporations all this dark money. They would have to limit what they could give. The Supreme Court this morning allows the wealthy, the rich, to use their money as free speech. That means that even if they're only like 1,000 billionaires or less than 1,000 billionaires in the United States of America, those less than 1,000 billionaires can outspend the vast majority of us 350 million people living here and have a say over our lives. So money and wealth was allowed to get more political power today because their voice now won't be stopped and can't be limited in the amount of money they can give. So that's a shame. We're gonna have to worry about that later. I'm sure I'm gonna be talking more about that later. That's for elections. They can give unlimited amount of money to parties and politicians. The other things that happened this week, and I should mention, is that Trump was shot down when it came to the Federal Reserve, and they said you can't replace the Federal Reserve heads or sitting board members. And I'll explain what that means, people, because it's hard to understand unless you understand what I've always talked about. Is that capitalism is horrible. It's a horrible economic system. Capitalism is a system that, if slavery was around, it'd be great for the slave owners, right? Well, the Supreme Court case that they ruled on when it came to the board in the Federal Reserve, the people, the private banks, and that's what they are. That's why I say understand this. It's private banks created in 1913. It's called the Federal Reserve. They print the money. They set the interest rates. They try to manage the money. And we all should know that it's a global impact it would have had on society, and wealthy people all over the world would have lost money, would have been limited in what they can do. And here the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't disrupt that to Trump. But then turned around and said, but you can fire and you could just at will fire anybody you want in an agency that deals with everything from air to medical to food to the health and safety of people living in this country. It's okay to put some no name, like the Robert Kennedy Jr. RFK, that fool that's sitting in there today, RFK Jr. This clown, this fool, and he's part of the Kennedy clan. They disowned him. The John F. Kennedy family, all of them disowned this clown. He's in charge of healthcare in America, and he is a nut, a crazy man, and he's got some crazy ideas. And when you are allowed to put somebody like him in charge, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the hell they're doing. The person in charge of education. Oh, and by the way, before I leave, this RFK Robert F Kennedy Jr. This guy, by the way, ever since he got into office, measles, things that had been eradicated, are back, are back. and people are dying because of this fool's mismanagement. Same thing with education, Department of Education. You've got the former owner, I guess, owner of WWE, McMahon is her name, Linda McMahon. This fool, this other clown that he put in charge, this woman in there, she is gutting the education department. They are getting rid of the education department. Think about that. If you ever study anything about history, if you look at history, you'll find out that the nations that went downhill is the least educated, because when you don't have education, those people are making those decisions, a brain drain there. People are making decisions based on mumbo jumbo, or making decisions based on political favors, or just straight up thievery or corruption. So they're not doing it because they're experts. And Linda McMahon is no expert. Her job is to get rid of the education department, do away with it. Think about that. A country without an education department. One reason why China is about to surpass the United States, and has already in many ways surpassed the United States in many of these places, because China got smart and they're like, wait a minute, just like Cuba, by the way, we're going to educate our people. We're going to educate our young people, and they got billions of people. So that's what they've been doing all this time. And the smarter your population is, the less mistakes people are going to make. And the smarter your population, the more educated they are. It goes without saying, they're going to think about things. Whereas here in the United States of America, where it was prohibited to just put anybody in there, 90 years of case law, the Supreme Court ruled on this 90 some years ago, say the president can't just fire the head of the FDA, the head of the health department, the head of the education department. You can't just fire people like that, because people are in there who are doing, day-to-day work, and they're experts, a lot of them, in their field. Well, today, or this week, I should say, the Supreme Court did away with that, and now we're going to have to live with those crazy people in charge of those agencies. But going back to where they also allowed, though, or disallowed, and said to Trump, you cannot fire the head of the Federal Reserve. That the reason why that was stopped and Trump was stopped there wasn't that the Supreme Court likes us or likes the people. No, they hate the people, especially poor people. It was because rich people would have suffered. Rich people with investments and all these billions of dollars would have suffered. And so they're okay with poor people suffering, or people in general, but they're not okay with the rich. This is why, gente, I tell you, if there was ever time to get rid of capitalism, it is today. Capitalism only takes care of the few, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musk, the 1 trillionaire right there. Capitalism only takes care of those few, and hurts the rest of the people, the rest of us. It relies on catastrophes and wars. It relies on people dying for it to even operate. Without capital, those wars, catastrophes, and horrible things that happen around the world, capitalism wouldn't exist. That's why the United States has never had a time in its history when it wasn't at war. You have to be at war if you're a capitalist country, because then your economic system will not work. Right. So this is, if there was ever a time to get rid of capitalism, this is one. And the reason why the Supreme Court did not rule in favor of the Donald Trump in this case is because it would have hurt the rich. So with that said, I'm going to end this podcast, or this broadcast here, just let you know that it was a big win in the Supreme Court today for those of us who have children who were born in another country, who came here, whose parents were quote unquote maybe undocumented, or quote unquote illegal, or maybe they overstayed it. Whatever the case, a lot of those children won't be broken up from their families. A lot of those families won't be deported. And Trump is mad as hell. But don't rest easy, and don't close both eyes, because this fool's gonna come back, and this crazy white supremacist party, they're all going to come back, and it may include the Democrats, so you better call them out too, may come back with the worst plan, and that's writing a law that will go after us. Okay. So I want to bring this news to you. It's a happy day. It's a good day. But at the same time, there's some bittersweetness in there with the other stuff that happened this week. And I'll see everybody soon. Okay. Ojo, que viva la raza. I'm out.